Hello? All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to start. Take your seats. We have the ladies on my left, my right. Complicated. I went to Altera. Please forgive me. All right. Ready to roll? All right. Good evening and welcome everybody to our parent networking night. It's been a while since we've done one of these. Due to COVID, we're one of the last programs we're restarting. Tonight is Tu B'Shvat. You know the famous pasuk in Chumash Devarim, Ki Adam Eitz HaSada, that people are compared to trees, and there's many, many comparisons that people in how people are compared to trees. Like trees, when they're growing, the farmer has to put a lot of keiches into making sure that every single sapling and that every branch of the young trees grow properly. And farmers have various tricks and various techniques up their sleeve that they can use to make sure that the trees are growing properly, that the young saplings are growing properly. We just celebrated Yud Shvat, and the very famous Maimer of Bas Ligani. The Rebbe talks about the great Eitzer, the great treasure, that the Eibishter gives the Yidden in our times to be able to overcome the tremendous galus that we're in right now. As parents, we're all given tools to be mechanech and bring up our children. As parents of children with special needs, we have extraordinary talents. And that is the Eitzer, the treasure that we sometimes, or many times, have to dig very deep to reveal. Here at the Friendship Circle, our job and our purpose is to help in whatever little way we can to help you bring out that Eitzer, bring out that treasure that's within you to bring up your children and be here as a community for one another. I'd like to begin by thanking, first of all, my wife Chani for organizing tonight's incredible event. The coordinating of many people's schedules to make sure that we have all the presenters and Rabbi Jacobson and everything, all the details that went into it. So, Grace and Shukach for everything that you do on behalf of, A special thank you to the staff and volunteers of the Friendship Circle for their year-round incredible dedication to our community. And last but not least, special thank you to Rabbi Jacobson for being here tonight. He needs no introduction. He was a chazer of the Rebbe, author. Personally, I listened to his shiurim on the My Life Chassidus Applied, which is a beautiful, check it out. Anyway, thank you all for joining us, and we'll discuss after Rabbi Jacobson speaks. I'll talk more about the presenters that we have for the second half of the program.
Good evening. I don't know if we say Good Yontif, it's a Rosh Hashanah Le'elanis. In Tovshin Mem, in 1980, right before Shavuos that year, the Rebbe came out with a new idea. And that was that all Jews, men, women, and also children, and even newborns, should come to shul to hear the Aseres HaDibros, the Ten Commandments. And ever since, this has become now a custom, as we all know, on the first day of Shavuos, that we bring even the newborn children. I remember it vividly. It was the year that I began officially writing Farbrengens. I have a colleague of mine who worked with me a little later, not 1980, but a few years later. And One of the things the Rebbe said in explaining why the importance of this is he brought a medrash that says that when we listen to Aseres HaDibros every Shavuos, it's like standing by Matan Torah. And just like by Matan Torah, all the Jews were there, literally everyone. There was no Jew that was not at Sinai, at Har Sinai. As a matter of fact, the Medrash says that if one Jew was missing, Hashem would not have given the Torah, and this includes even children and even newborn. So when we recreate that every Shavuos, and you want to manifest that same energy, we bring all the Jews, including the newborns. The Rebbe also brought then, so we know the interesting Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, where it talks about Avrechon ben Zakkai had 5 special students. These are all great sages themselves. Each in turn was a master teacher. And he talks about the qualities of each one of them. One was someone who remembered everything. Another was a person who was a Mayan HaMizgaber, like a relentless wellspring of Torah. But on Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya, when describing his quality, it says something which seems a little, well, it's not odd, but it definitely does not talk about his quality. It actually talks about his mother. And the expression of the Mishnah is, Ashrei Yeladate. How special and precious is the one that gave birth to him. In other words, we're not talking about his qualities, we're talking about his parent, his mother especially. And the commentaries all obviously ask, what did his mother do that to the extent that all his qualities were all overshadowed by the fact how special his mother was? So the Gemara tells us that when he was a little baby, his mother would take his vigala, to take him in his little bassinet, is the right expression, to the Beis Medrash, to listen to the words of Torah. And even though you would think he's a newborn child, he's still in a crib, doesn't understand, doesn't speak, but her wisdom, she understood that a child absorbs much more than we know, and that this little child, even though he's a newborn, he absorbs everything that's being taught. And indeed, that would impact him the rest of his life. So whatever qualities he had, and all the achievements through his life, his scholarship, his midas tevis, his personality, everything that Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya was all in the credit that his mother understood, that to grow to be a person like that, it all begins from the youngest of age in those formative years, when he was a newborn, and he would just be there by the window, listening to the words of Torah that was studied in the Beis Medrash. And from that, the Rebbe derived that the same thing by Matan Torah and by Shavuos, even though a scientist or a therapist or a psychologist may say, what does a child understand? That's not how we Jews look at it. A child understands perhaps even better than adults, because a child is not jaded by preconceived ideas and all the distortions that adults may have. A child's like a dry sponge that absorbs everything. Asher Yeladate. And that was essentially the basis of this campaign, if you want to call it that no matter how young the child is, they should all be by Matan Torah. Now here's an interesting addition that many people are not aware of, but I heard about it then. Because I remember when we wrote the Sikha, we were looking up the Yerushalmi, the Medrash, all the different sources, and someone happened to share with me that there was a couple who just a few months earlier, or maybe a month earlier, not sure how long before Shavuos that year, gave birth to a child that what we would call a special child. That was not so-called the norm. And of course, they went through the pain and the crying and all the sadness that comes with something of that nature. No matter how much we come to understand it may be a great blessing, it's still painful, tremendously painful. I don't have to tell you. So they wrote to the Rebbe. Now, I'm not saying that the Rebbe made the campaign because of them, but who knows? Maybe that was the catalyst, maybe it was part of the reasons. And the Rebbe wrote back to them. He sent them to look at these sources that I just cited about the Asher Yeladate. Why? Because of the effect, even in the youngest age, on a child, which you would think the child doesn't even understand. And the Rebbe said that applies to all children, because all children by Matan Torah, even special children, including special children. And they too are affected by Matan Torah and by the Torah that they learn. Asher Yeladate. And it's up to you to make sure that your child is exposed to the words of God, to the words of Torah. So how did this story come to me? Because they wanted to look up the sources. So someone suggested they should call me, because I was working in the Sichos. And they did. Right after Shavuos, they called me. Again, I don't know exact timing, whether it happened right before Shavuos. It was around that period of time. And so I looked it up and I shared it with them. But I realized something, you could say this is something ruchnisdik, spiritual, miraculous maybe. The Rebbe is saying that the child is affected. But the fact is, today, as opposed to the science of, let's say, 50 years ago, where child psychologists thought that a child is deaf, mute, and blind. I don't mean that literally necessarily, but definitely intellectually, and child were completely neutral. Child is not affected by events in its life at an early age. Today it's the exact opposite. We know the earlier the age, the more the impact. So these timeless ideas of Torah have become, not that we need confirmation from the scientific and medical world, but when it is confirmed, I don't know if you know this, but today they say those early formative years of a child, every second, I checked it many times, I couldn't believe the number, 1 million neurons are developed in a child in its first 3 years. 1 million neurons every second. So in other words, what's happening to the child in those early formative years shapes the brain, shapes the mind, shapes everything about that child. We don't see it because it's not visible to the naked eye. We may not even understand it. But when you take into account as well another Gemara that we're very familiar with, and that is that in the mother's womb, every child is taught the entire Torah. That's what we're told. Melamdim Eisei Kol HaTorah Kula. And then before birth, the angel comes and makes silences and makes the child forget consciously what it learned. That's why we have, you can't see it in my mouth because I have a mustache, but if you want to check, we all have a cleft right above our upper lip. That's the indentation of the malach making to the child to forget what it learned. So the Alter Rebbe asked the question, what's the point of teaching the whole Torah to a child and making forget? And he answers, we only forget on the conscious level, but not on the subconscious level, not on the superconscious level. In other words, embedded in the very DNA and the very neurons and the very mind itself and heart of the child, of every one of us, is the whole Torah. Whenever my mother is in an audience and I speak, I always say, everything I learned in this woman's womb. And after that, it was all downhill, no matter how good the schools you go to. The best yeshiva, you learn the whole Torah, and it's coming straight from a Malach Hashem. And it becomes part of who we are. The point here is that not everything we see with the naked eye tells us what reality is. The whole point of Torah, especially Chassidus, focuses on the invisible. Who is the human being? The body or the soul? So the body is the vehicle. And we want to have a healthy vehicle, and we want it to be in every possible way blessed. But at the end of the day, the body is still a vehicle. And it's the neshama of the child, the neshama of the human being that defines who we really are. And I say this without apologetics. This is not meant to patronize that even if the vehicle is not always so perfect, no, there's a neshama. It's meant to actually tell the truth. There's a powerful letter, and I'm sure Friendship Circle and many of you have seen it. If not, I'll be happy to share it. I have actually a few letters that I gathered together from the Rebbe on topics that's related to this evening. I'll be happy to share it. If maybe you have it already. Maybe it's I mean, they're not secret documents. They're around, but I just put it into one file. So the Rebbe writes to I think it's to I don't know if it's a social worker, I believe, that was running a school for special children. And the Rebbe writes a point that I just want to emphasize. Again, if you heard it already, great. If not, it's always, even if you have, it's always worth hearing again. And the Rebbe says that the word special children is not a euphemism. It's not like a cute way of like saying we don't want to say handicapped or any other way, so we say special. The Rebbe said when you say special, he means special. Because Hashem would never bring a child into this world without all its needs and all its qualities. And so if something seems to be missing, it means Hashem compensated and gave the child some other strength that other people don't have. What the Rebbe actually said, similar to when he spoke in Tov Shalom Zayin in the summer, so we had here talking about Eretz Yisrael, which is on our minds, and the soldiers sacrificing their lives. So there's a group that were brought here who were all, unfortunately, people who were wounded in battle in Eretz Yisrael. So besides the preciousness of such soldiers in general, but especially those that were hurt in defending and protecting the innocent men, women, and children in Eretz Yisrael, so the Rebbe spoke to them downstairs in 770 in Hebrew. And of course, that was when the Rebbe coined the expression that they call Yunake, the injured, the casualties, the handicapped soldiers. And I want to suggest, he says, a Jew suggests things, even if you're not asked. I want to suggest something, even though I wasn't asked, that the name should be changed to Mitziyone Yisrael, the exceptional ones in Israel. And the Rebbe explained this point, exceptional. The Rebbe brings as well, just as another example, I'll get back to the letter in a moment, the Gemara uses, and Chassidus explains, an expression on a blind person, le'aleinu. So the Lashon in Gemara is Sagi Nohar. A blind person is called Sagi Nohar. You know what Sagi Nohar means? Abundant light. Sagi means extra light, intensive light. That's why the expression Lashon Sagi Nohar. So Chassidus asks a very a very obvious klotzkash. What, we're making fun of a blind person, like saying the blind person cannot see. So you're saying there's so much light. Why would you say something like that? That's like it's like humiliating. Why would the Gemara call someone that's blind with a lot of light? And Chassidus answers in many Maimorim. This is brought in quite a few Maimorim. It says, no, he has much light. The problem is he doesn't have the filters. You know, it's like looking at the sun and you get blinded by it. Not because there's no light, because too much light. And the filters in the eye are not properly balanced. So we can't see, not because it's dark, but because there's too much light. And the Rebbe explains that too much light means that there's other strengths that he has. So again, this is not something that lechatchila we initially ask for. We don't ask for these type of extra blessings. But after the fact, and going back to the letter, so the Rebbe writes to this practitioner, so you have to know that special children means it literally, not figuratively. And you running a school like that, or running a home like that, and supporting such children, need to know it, and everyone you hire needs to be sensitive to that they are actually special. And if you're able to look with the eyes of the soul, with the eyes of the neshama, into the neshama of the child, you'll see it. And then the Rebbe says something quite I would say, quite harsh. He says, and if somebody that works by you does not see it or does not appreciate it, they should not work with children like this. They don't deserve to work with children like this. And children sense, whether they say it or not, whether you think they understand it or not, they sense whether you have the confidence in their neshama. So you see from all of this, I'm not here to come, I think inappropriate for me to come try to console anyone. You've all gone through your challenges, but ultimately in Yiddishkeit, and especially with Chassidus, we learn all about the neshama. Look how does Tanya begin? That every neshama, when it comes down to this world, in addition to being taught the entire Torah that I mentioned, Mashbiyanei say Tehi Tzadik V'Alti Rosha. Every neshama, doesn't say any exception. This includes the neshamas, even neshamas that come into bodies and into lives that will be challenging and difficult and may have limitations on one end, but the shvuah means the oath that Hashem gives to that child. And the Rebbe explains, mashbiin also comes from the word mazbiin, like v'achalta v'savota means to sate, to feed. Not just to feed, v'achalta v'savota, you shall be full. To satiate, to sate, the neshama is also fed, and the sinas keach powers. So when you see special powers for a special child, then it's even more strength, even more mashbiya nese. And again, you know better than I, and I've seen it, I've been in awe of it, whether it's family members or others that I've met, that ultimately you see the love, you see the lack of ego, and many of the midas that we're not so proud of. By children like this, they have a certain transparency. As the Rebbe told Chazan Malavani, it's a famous clip by dollars. Chazan Joseph Malavani was many years a Chazan in the Fifth Avenue Synagogue. So he went by the Rebbe by dollars, and he's speaking in Yiddish, and he tells the Rebbe that he's going to London to visit his son, his autistic son. He's in a home for autists. And he was obviously a very severe case, he tells the Rebbe. So he's been in a home for quite a few years. And the Rebbe stops him and says, they say that autistic children don't have relationships with other people. They find it difficult to have a relationship with others. However, the Rebbe says that means that they have a direct relationship with Hashem himself because they don't have other people in the way, so to speak. So he tells the Rebbe, it's true, my son has a special love for tzitzis, arbe kamfis, as he called it. And that's when the Rebbe suggested he should put a tzedakah pushka. All going back to the same theme. The Rebbe sees us for our neshamas. All of us. Doesn't matter what kind of body we have. No matter what challenges we have. And when you look with the eyes of the neshama, everything is different because the neshamas, that before they come into this world, there's no such thing as a handicapped soul. There's no such thing as a soul with limitations. Every neshama is a chelik elekam mal mamish. Again, no exceptions. Now, why some of us, some parents, some families are blessed and challenged, I would say, at the same time, where they have to focus on the chelik elikam mal mamish with a child like that, we'll never know those mysteries. We don't know God's mysteries. But there's no question that when the body is limited in some way, so you have to find the strengths elsewhere, so you have to go to the neshama. And that's where we turn to. And then we can find soul levels that you can never, ever have found had you not dug deeper. So bottom line is this: how you treat your child from the youngest of age is going to shape this child's life forever and ever. If you be zeicha, a merit, you may see it. But even if you don't always see it, never think there's no impact. Never. Like from the story of Asher Yaladate. And his whole life, Rabbi Shua ben Chananya, always, that was his title. You looked at him, you saw how great his mother was. Even though at that young age, that child didn't show any reaction when he was brought in the vigala in his crib to the Beis Medrash. And just like we don't see the whole Torah that's within our souls on the superconscious level, but the fact of the matter that through life, through that type of commitment and through that type of devotion, helping your child bring out their neshama keiches will have impact not just on the child, but on all of us, on the families. And I've seen this in my own eyes. I remember when my sister had a child, a Down syndrome child, and of course came with all the pain. and all the anguish. And then she and her husband decided to name the child Bracha. And they were sincere about it. It wasn't just a way of escaping from the realities, that they saw a deeper bracha in her. You know, she today was 18 or 19 years old. I'm not sure the exact age. And I saw the way, the dignity that my sister and my brother-in-law treated that child and introduced the child to the family without shame, without regrets. And I remember at Simchas, my sister would bring her baby. And frankly, some of my family members were very uncomfortable. It was awkward. What do you say? What do you do? And my sister, who was like, very unabashed, would just, here, hold my bracha a little, And they had no choice. They had to hold her. I'm not trying to criticize them. They're just in their own comfort zone. So very difficult sometimes for people to go out of their lane and see things not in the regular structures. But anyone that is able to go there, we know it opens up new horizons. And I've seen the impact that it had on her family as bracha. She was a bracha and is a bracha for her whole family. They probably, and I've seen it, learned levels of love that you would never learn. And I'm just using one example. And again, I feel a little uncomfortable actually, because you probably have many examples of your own. But I'm at the mic, so I'm saying what I've experienced. And if it resonates, excellent. And at the end of the day, I'm quoting the Rebbe time and again here, not just a Chassidim we quote the Rebbe, is because we get strength from a Rebbe. Because a Rebbe sees things for what they are, the truth of something. We sometimes, we don't. Look, the fact of the matter is, as an author, I can tell you the biggest lie, the biggest cliche is don't judge a book by its cover. You always hear that, right? There's no one that doesn't judge a book by its cover. That's why it's $1 billion industry to design book covers and packaging. They spend more money on packaging than on the product. So why we say that don't judge a book by its cover? People do judge by the cover because we are external people, we're superficial. And if the cover looks good, it will affect us. And in many ways, even according to Torah, you have the idea of Pri Eitz Hadar, a beautiful fruit, the esrog, Zekeli Van Veyu, should have a beautiful mezuzah, a beautiful sefer Torah, a beautiful home, dirana, a beautiful home. Because even external beauty is not to be dismissed. When it says sheker achein vehevla yefi in Eishes Chayil, as the Rebbe said, also $1 was a woman who was a former beauty queen in Eretz Yisrael. And she told the Rebbe, I was a former beauty queen, and now I'd like to have a bracha to become a kala and get married. The Rebbe gave her a bracha, and then as usual, the Rebbe called her back and said, when it says, sheker achein vehevla yefi, ki im isha yiras Hashem hi tisalo. It doesn't mean that chen and yefi are meaningless. It means they're meaningless, they're sheker and hevel and vanity and halal, if you don't have the isha yiras Hashem, the yiras Hashem, the pnimius. But if you have the pnimius, absolutely you want to also have the chitzenius. And actually the beauty, that's why we say by the Imois, we say yifas mari, yifas teir. If it's sheker achein vehevla yefi, why is it a quality? And we mean they're not just spiritually beautiful, they were physically beautiful. Because there's something about the outer as well, and we're not going to dismiss that. But its value is ultimately what we say, teche kibari, that the pnimius, the neshama is shining through, that even the keli also sees it. And that's indeed the case, that when you're able to look with neshama eyes, the things that some people may feel uncomfortable with, or they're not accustomed to, or it's different, for you it's not different, it's a deeper beauty. And again, we don't know why Hashem chose it to be that way. That's beyond our pay grade, if you wish. That's beyond our understanding, our bandwidth, they call it today. But there's no doubt that when we hear from the Rebbe, as I remember a journalist once told me, he said to me, he was here as a secular journalist, he saw the Rebbe for the first time, and I asked him, so what's your impression? He told me, I see a man who looks at people not for who they are, but for what they can become. I would say pretty good insight. We look at people, what we see. What you see is what you get. Maybe sometimes we see a little potential. But we're external people, and we do look at the surface and often judge things that way, even though it's not right to do. But a Rebbe sees a neshama, and he sees what people are capable of. And that's why the Rebbe demanded so much. Because you and I may think, hey, I can't really do it. And time and again, the Rebbe said, no, you could. And not because the Rebbe was just insistent or because he had high standards, it's because he saw that you do have the capacity more than you can ever imagine. Why it has to come through sometimes pain and through pressure and through challenges, these are the mysteries of God's ways. But even the Rebbe Rashab says about the Alter Rebbe, that when he went into prison, story of Yutas Kislev, so the Rebbe Rashab uses these words. He says, even though it's difficult to say, especially about the Alter Rebbe, but it was the pressure and the anguish that he had from sitting in prison that was like the olive. That the olive does not produce the best oil until you press it. Kosis lamoyer, until you press it. He says it's difficult to say, but he gave that example on the Alter Rebbe. Because what does that mean? The Alter Rebbe had to go to prison and suffer for 53 days, and all the humiliation, all the threats, and all the danger that could have happened in order for him to reveal the deepest secrets of the oil of Chassidus. But this is God's mysterious ways. We explain the same questions we have on Golos, the same question we have on events that are happening in Israel now, what the world calls October 7th, Shmini Atzeres Simchas Tov, and the same with all the tragedies and the losses that we have endured. But like we learned a few weeks ago in the Parsha, the Eden were Mitzrayim Kashayana Esam, as they were afflicted and oppressed, Ken Yirbe v'Chen Yifritz. In direct proportion to that, they thrived, they blossomed, they flourished. Why does it have to come that way? I heard many times that the Rebbe asked that question by Fabrengen, and very often he would just say, we don't have an answer. It's God's mysterious ways. But, as the Rebbe emphasizes time and again, we don't ask why. We ask, what are we going to do about it? Because why is the question of a victim, and we're never victims. We don't control the circumstances that happen to us, but we completely control the attitude we have around them. The Rebbe writes this in a letter to a Holocaust survivor, an English letter to a doctor. Again, if you want a copy, just let me know, and I'll be happy to send this letter. This letter is lesser publicized. And the Rebbe writes, he says, why? We don't know why. If God wanted us to know why, he would have told us. If it was important for our lives, that for our serving Hashem, to know why, of course he would have told us. The fact that we were not told means we don't need to have the answer for the why. But we do have a bigger question, and that we do have an answer for. What are we going to do about it? What are you and I going to do about it? Now, this isn't just semantics. This is about a very different approach. One is a victim reacting to a problem, and the other is a proactive leader who figures out that no matter what the challenge is, I'm going to figure out how to get to where I have to get to. Okay, there's a setback, there's a difficulty, there's an impediment, but that's what a leader is about. What are we going to do about it? At the end of that letter, interestingly, the Rebbe writes to this doctor, says, you may think I'm just, what's the word he uses there, pontificating, philosophical about the Holocaust, as if it's like a theoretical thing. I want to tell you, I too am a Holocaust survivor. The Rebbe uses those words. I lost my brother, my grandmother, my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law, my brother-in-law, and other close family members, besides obviously the tragedy of all the Jews that perished. So interesting how the Rebbe identified, wanted to make him clear to him that he wasn't just talking from a distance, that he himself is talking from his own gut. So there's some strength that comes. Like one of the Rebbes once told a chassid who suffered a tragedy, he said to him, I don't have answers for you, but I can cry with you. And don't think the crying is not strength. We don't have answers because the most brilliant mind cannot speak to a broken heart, but we can comfort each other and we give strength. What we want is not answers, we want is strength. The strength to deal with it, the strength to become stronger people, and above all, the strength to give our children even more strength. So, in sum, I feel very humbled and almost in awe of all of you, because when you really get down to it, and again, this is not being said in any patronizing manner, the exact opposite, that there's a special place for parents and for family members who have suffered in some way. And whether we understand it or not, you have a direct channel, just like the Rebbe said to Malavani. A child has a direct channel, the same as the parents who deal with it and have to endure and have to muster up the strength psychologically, emotionally, in every possible way. They have to say their special keiches. Again, nobody asked for it, nobody expected it, but that's when it happens. We know that's the only way to approach it, and that's how we Jews have made it through all these thousands of years. We did not cower in fear, we didn't retreat, and we didn't surrender. We took whatever challenge it was, and we turned it into opportunities. We took the energy, even the grief, and we channeled it into growth. You sow with tears, but those tears become raindrops that make things grow in tremendous ways. And I'll just borrow a term I've been using recently due to the war in Eretz Yisrael, that the Jewish people, but especially those of like yourselves and others who have dealt with particular challenges, you're like a tea bag. You don't know how strong you are until you put into hot water. Now, we're not looking for hot water, but once you're there, that's what you do. You produce tremendous keiches, tremendous power. And as soon as Mashiach comes, which we know will be very quickly, as the Rebbe promised us, we'll say, Eitcha Hashem Ke'anaftabi, we'll be able to then see that which we cannot see today. You know, the forces behind the scenes. So imagine looking at your child, that today you may feel the child in some way has a limitation, but in a very short time you'll be able to see unbelievable neshama, a neshama like no other, and that has tremendous keiches. So not always we're in the mood, and we may not always understand it, but we have to forge ahead and do what has to be done. That's the ultimate power that we have. So Hashem should bless each of you, tremendous nachas from all your children, special nachas. And may the child bring, and many children bring many more brachas to you. And may we be zeicha to the day, like by Matan Torah, when all the people who had any handicaps were healed, that it will all be healed. The coming of Mashiach, B'kar of Mamish, will be reunited with the Rebbe and with all the Chassidim, with all our families. And we'll then be able to see the greatness that comes out of Golus in general, and even the Golus Prati, the personal challenges that each of us has. So maybe because of Mamish, you mentioned Tu B'Shvat, Chamisha Asar B'Shvat is the way the Rebbe would call it, is Rosh Hashanah Le'ilonis. And Elon is all about growth, tremendous potential. When you see the seed in the ground, you can't see the potential. And then you see it grow into a tree, and you say, wow, that little seed. As I said, even in the birth, all the powers that a child that will become adult is all there in the concentrated seed. So it's a Yom Gula for seeing such brachas, pri eitze pri, that one fruit will create another fruit perpetually. Again, we'll march into the Gula Amitis Vashlema. Only simchas begoli beteva nida vanigla for each of you, and only nachas and beautiful psudas tevas. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Jacobson. I think it's I think it's gonna be my next famous line, not mine, but a line I'll be using a lot. Yeah, give me a second. They should see me also, right? Never mind. Okay. Thank you everyone that joined on the Zoom, and thank you everyone that joined on the live stream. We're not going to